E aí, galera, beleza? Como estamos aí passando? Espero que todo mundo esteja bem, espero que vocês continuem empolgados para aprender mais sobre SQL Server, sempre empolgados, né? E hoje a gente tem mais uma sessão aqui para o SQL Maniacs. E, galera, hoje o assunto é muito legal, um assunto que com certeza vocês têm ouvido falar bastante, tá? E a gente tem o André, cara muito fera, profundo conhecedor do tema, que vai apresentar aí pra gente a SQL Server com Docker, que é muito interessante. O Marcelo, ele acompanhou algumas palestras no SQL Server de Lisboa, que ele participou, e ele falou, explicou para mim, e eu dei uma pesquisada rápida, e achei o assunto bem interessante também. Tá? Então, eu hoje estou aqui só para fazer uma breve introdução, só para vocês saberem que estamos com mais um webcast, o Psychomaniacs. Eu vou passar para o Marcelo aí fazer uma introdução melhor do que a gente tem aí para vocês nesses próximos meses. E, galera, obrigado por vocês estarem aqui novamente participando. Se você estiver ao vivo, assistindo o vídeo, fica à vontade, manda as perguntas. A gente está aqui acompanhando, a gente vai passando as suas perguntas para o André, seja durante a apresentação ou no final, depende de como ele prefere trabalhar. Mas obrigado. Se você estiver assistindo a gravação, fica sempre atento, fica sempre esperto aí, que estamos sempre divulgando no Facebook, no meu blog, no blog do Marcelo, quando tem as próximas apresentações online do Psychomaniacs. Beleza, galera? Grande abraço aí para todos. Vou passar aqui para o Marcelão. Marcelão, é contigo, cara.
Valeu, obrigado, Vitão. Deixa eu pegar aqui o... Bom, acredito que vocês todos consigam ver a minha tela. A nossa tela aqui tem o símbolo do Maniacs, do SQL Maniacs. Vitor, tá conseguindo ver aí, tranquilo?
Tô sim, cara, tá tranquilão. Tô vendo a sua tela aqui.
Perfeito. Então, pessoal, sejam bem-vindos, como disse o Vitor, sejam bem-vindos. Hoje a gente tem o André falando sobre SQL Server em Docker, um assunto assim sensacional, muito importante, interessantíssimo. Vocês vão provavelmente administrar isso, todos os DBAs vão com certeza administrar e usar esse assunto mais para frente. Isso é muito experimental ainda, mas assim é um negócio sensacional. Assim, temos mais alguns eventos ainda esse semestre, né? Então eu coloquei aqui os principais. O primeiro deles é o SAT de Joinville, que vai acontecer nesse sábado. Vai acontecer nesse sábado lá na Univille, em Joinville. Para se vocês quiserem saber mais detalhes, entra aí no link. Mas, assim, eu não preciso nem falar nada sobre o SQL Saturday, né? O SQL Saturday é um evento sensacional, assim, troca de conhecimento, onde você tem que investir, se você não é da cidade, você tem que investir na acomodação e na passagem, que é um valor ridiculamente baixo para o nível de conhecimento e para o nível de networking que você faz no evento desse, tá? Então, nós vamos ter o SAT em Joinville, vamos ter o nosso The Amazing Data nos dias 19 e 20 de maio desse ano. 19 vai ser a pré-com, com o Benjamin Nevares. Pessoal, não faltem, participem. Esse evento vai ser assim, sensacional. E no dia 20 nós vamos ter a parte gratuita com uma série de palestras de uma hora de duração, tá? O link está embaixo também, theamazingdata.com, tá? E nós vamos ter do semestre no Brasil, o último Saturday vai ser o de Caxias do Sul, no dia 24 de junho, tá? A gente vai ter também de Brasília, mas isso vai ser lá para agosto. Ok, pessoal? Estamos aqui então com obrigado pela atenção de vocês. Estamos aqui hoje com o André para fazer uma apresentação para a gente sobre Docker, sobre SQL Server e Docker. Eu assisti a palestra dele, eu assisti essa sessão dele no SAT de Lisboa, no SAT de Portugal, e assim, sensacional, é um assunto assim muito interessante. E eu vou passar para o inglês, eu queria agradecer ele por estar dispondo do tempo dele para nos ajudar. Hi Andre, I was just telling the guys that I would like to thank you very much for your time and for your effort to provide us with your knowledge on SQL Server on Dockers.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me.
No problem at all. You can, if you want, you can start. You can go ahead.
Let's see if that works. I tried to grab my mouse earlier and I couldn't find it.
Okay, see if you can find it.
Oh wait, it's all the way over there. Oh, okay. So I have a dual screen setup, and you guys are on my left screen, and something else is on my middle screen, and then on my right screen I have something. So I was a bit lost. Let's see where I am. So you should see my screen now.
I am seeing the extracting. You're extracting MS SQL Server Windows.
Yeah, it should be extracting, but it's doing nothing.
Okay.
Which is totally fine. I can always switch to.
Okay, I can see your screen now.
Yeah, this is my laptop, just to show you that it works there as well. Let's see. We should have a screen here that. Yeah, you can see this, right?
Yes.
And if let's see if I have Docker stuff here. Yeah, here we go. So I can always demo it, no problem. It's all on here as well. And with that, I should first do a small introduction. Nothing to, oh, not on that screen. No, it's disappearing to my third screen. Okay, cancel, view. Where is the slideshow? Use presenter view. No, don't do that. Should I do that? No, that's the presenter view.
That's the, yes, you're switching.
Yeah, the funny thing is,
you're gonna have to, yeah, because you're using lots of screens. You're gonna, yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Ha.
Primary monitor. Let's see which one that is. Always good to find out. Here we go.
There you go. Yes. Thank you. I'm gonna switch to mute, and anything you can call us. Okay.
Cool. Also, I must say the your SQL Saturday, Joinville. That's the best name ever for a town.
Joinville, yes, Joinville. Yes, exactly.
That is an awesome name for a SQL Saturday town.
Sure.
So, good evening, everyone. Or yes, it's evening with you guys as well. 6 o'clock or something, right? Let's start with a little bit about myself. I have my slide deck up from the SQL Saturday in Lisbon, where I did this presentation, I'm going to do this slightly the same thing. I always find out some things afterwards that people were trying while I was in the classroom talking about it, and somebody was trying something out and we couldn't make it work, but in the week after we figured it out. So I'll be showing that as well, about connecting SQL Server on Linux, which is works slightly in a different way. And I have a few slides in the deck about Docker itself from the Docker company, but don't worry, this is not an advertisement for Docker or something. It's just a few slides, and then we're gonna go and just use the thing and see what it does and how it does that. So you get a feeling of what it is and how it works. So not many slides, I think. Am I lying? How many have I? 27? Oh no. Don't worry, the half of it is the volunteers of the SQL Saturday in Lisbon. So there's just a few sponsors from SQL Saturday. I'm just gonna go through, and some volunteers, some familiar faces maybe. They were in the slide deck. Sponsored. Here we go. So this is me. I am from the Netherlands, and I always say this in my classes and in my sessions, sorry, that if you have any questions about the Netherlands, and I know you have this question box that you can type things into, but if you have any questions about the Netherlands, there is one thing I cannot help you with. I get that question all the time. I have never in my life been inside a coffee shop. I don't know how that works. The only thing that I do know is that we have this law against smoking in a public place, which is a bit awkward if you have a coffee shop to run. So we changed our law a little bit, and now it is only allowed to smoke cannabis in a coffee shop, not normal cigarettes. That would be illegal.
Okay, I'm gonna interrupt you right there and laugh a lot about it because it's hilarious. I'm sorry.
Imagine being the guy from the government who has to check if you are not smoking normal cigarettes in that place, right?
Yes, exactly.
This is all I know about the place. I've never been in one, so I don't smoke, so I have no, I don't know, but I get a lot of questions about it. So, so further about me, I'm a data platform MVP is called these days. It used to be SQL Server. It still is SQL Server, but they call it data platform these days. I work for a company called Cloud DBA, which I run together with my buddy William Durkin, who is an Englishman and lives in Germany, where we have a lot of fun with moving people into Azure and doing SQL Server stuff in general. My contact details are on there. If you have any questions, if you want to have the scripts, if you tried something and it didn't work, or if anything, just ping me. I'm on Twitter as André Kaman, and my email addresses are there, both my business and my private address. If you try, it says Andre Kaman at clouddba.io. That's my business address. If you want to ping me privately, andrekaman@gmail.com always works. I have this bad habit that if I promise to give you slides or something, you really have to ping me like. You really have to ping me like 3 times or something. If I don't respond right away, I'm so sorry. This is a bad habit for me. Just ping me again. I don't mind. So don't worry about that. And anything, you can reach me on Twitter as well. So I've been working with SQL Server for like 20 years or something. I'm not completely sure when it started, midway in the 90s somewhere. And I've started working in IT. My first paid job was in 1989. When I was, I'm from 1971, so I was 18 years old when I started working in IT, long time ago. Yeah, enough about me. Let's dive into some stuff. This Docker thing, and this is some explanation from the Docker company itself. And I've put it in there because, well, they explain it well. It's a bit of a marketing thing, but don't worry about it. It's basically, this is the challenge. And I work for a company right now, a customer, where they have this kind of problem where you have software that contains oh my god, what do we use? We have BizTalk, SharePoint, SQL Server, SCOM, SCCM, Active Directory. There's lots and lots and lots of stuff, and we develop things in that system, and we all want it to work automatically. We don't want to touch the production system. So I'm in PowerShell almost more than I use T-SQL these days. And the problem is, how do you do the development cycle and the release cycle of this, right? For development, you may have a VM or a server or some laptop with some virtualization software on it, and then you have to go to a Q&A or a quality testing thing, or you want users to be testing on it. So you have to roll it out to a data center with some other servers, and that might be in the cloud or in your local data center. And at some point, it will have to end up on production servers, and they may be different SAN structures or networks and firewalls, and everything could be, and different Active Directories, and everything could be different. And you almost sometimes need different technology to push these things through that whole stack. Now, this gives you a support matrix that can be quite complicated. What do you use for what? How do you deploy things? A website on a laptop, easy. SQL Server, maybe a bit harder. Try and install things like data protection manager or SCOM or something on a system where you do not have virtualization. It gets harder, especially if you have to mix that with Active Directory and whatnot. And this is just the Windows land I'm talking about. Here's an analogy that they're using. I think it's quite a cool one. This explains it well. The top layer is all kinds of products, various kinds of products that you need to ship, like a crate of goods or an expensive car or a barrel with which I hope has some nice port in it, or maybe whiskey or something nice. That would be cool. And how do you transport it? Clearly, the forklift underneath is the bad choice for the car, right? So how do you do that? Again, this gives you a really difficult support matrix. What do you use for what? How do you do your deployment? Do you pick the same? Is that even possible? In this situation, I think not. Could be hard. So what did the industry come up with? Well, containers, and that's what we're talking about as well. They just made the standard shipping container that they can transport with all the means of transport. Everybody knows how to handle these things. And as long as you get your stuff in the container, and that's your problem as a developer, you make sure it fits and that it's set up right, and then you can deploy it anywhere. And this is basically what the what Docker tries to fix. It is basically, it works on my machine. You've probably heard every developer say this, and if you're a developer and you're listening, you've probably said this, and you think, well, it works on my machine, and if it does work there, why won't it work when I deploy it? What's wrong? What is different? And containers are fixing that, basically, or trying to fix that by not making it different, but exactly the same. You, as a developer, set up your container, and all the admins need to do is deploy the containers, or even the DevOps people, right? You can do it together. So this is what Docker is. It's a shipping container system for code. You put all your stuff in a container, and how you do that, we'll look at that later. I have an example of how Microsoft put SQL Server in a container, and you can actually change that. It's completely open, and we'll look at that. And this is basically what Docker is. Now, I think this is already the last. Well, yeah, okay. Here's the matrix thingy. This fixes our problems. Ooh. Oh, yeah. And a few more internal things about a container. As we'll see later, we'll dive in. We'll dive to the command line pretty quickly, but you could say, well, VMs don't VMs do this as well already? Well, sort of, kind of. The VMs are much heavier, and deploying a VM is a lot more work, because each virtual machine comes with its own guest OS and its own setup, and it's much harder to deploy than a containerized system. A containerized system just reuses your host OS. It reuses a lot of DLLs that you might be using, and if once you've got a container running a second one will even reuse parts of the first one that you're using. There's a lot of reuse there. Also, things like networking, it's all built in. There's a lot of parts that have been thought through inside containers to make it really easy. And how easy that is, you'll see in a minute, to deploy a container, and much more lightweight than deploying just copying a VM. I'm gonna skip this one. Oh, yeah. No, I'll show this. I don't need screenshots for this. Let's just go into my VM. Let's see if that thing, it hangs completely, doesn't it? No, it's done. Oh, cool. But I'll show you here. I'll go to an empty screen, and I'll show you first what I have installed here, because this is a Windows 10 machine. This is my workstation. You can use Docker on a Linux machine, but today I'm going to talk use Windows, just because you can. And I know my way around Windows a bit better than Linux, even though I do know my way around it. But since this talk is about SQL Server, I wanted to show the Windows side. So what I've installed here is the Docker application, and this one is the beta version. And this is because the beta version had, let me see if I can show you this. If I go here and then zoom in, does that, whoa, that zoomed a bit far. Let's try that again, but not that crazy. Here, switch. Oh, so this is okay to see, right? You can see this because if I zoom in, it does crazy zooming. Yeah, the zooming. Okay, the zooming is complete.
We're okay to we're seeing it, Andre.
You see?
It's okay.
Okay,
Yes.
cool,
Okay.
cool. The zooming is a bit nuts. So I'll just select this part here. The switch to Linux containers. This is the cool part about the application that you get with the Docker application. It has a switching mechanism. So this is one of the few places right now where on one system you can have Linux containers running and Windows containers running at the same time. Now, how does it do that? Well, really simple, because I mentioned before the Docker a Docker container uses your host OS. So I'm on a Windows machine, so I can only run Windows Docker containers, Windows-based Docker containers. A Linux Docker container wouldn't work on a Windows host because it uses the host. Well, this application uses a VM. I've got here a Moby Linux VM that is installed by the Docker application, and as soon as you switch to Docker for Linux, it switches it on. I can actually throw this thing away, and as soon as I switch the application to use Linux, it reinstalls it and switches it on. Now, one thing, if you're running this on your laptop, and I figured this out because I have a laptop that has only 8 gigabytes of memory. The Linux variant uses at least 3 gigs of free memory. So sometimes I have to kill a few other processes before I can even switch it to Linux. But that might be something that you run into when you try to switch to Linux and it complains. It needs at least 3 gigabytes of free memory. This is why I'm running this on my test box, because even though this is a Windows 10 machine, it's quite a beefy box. It has a double 6 core and 96 gigs of memory. So I'm basically reusing an old server as my workstation. And I remote desktop into it because it's way too noisy. It's in the attic somewhere of my house. So enough about those parts. Let me show you what happens inside this Docker container. What you then do, and we're in the Windows part right now, and what you do first is you get an image, because you can oh no, wait, let me back out there. This is not the only thing that you need to run. So you run the Docker application, but what you also need to run, features, apps and features, does it show that? No, programs and features. And then when you have programs and features, you have here turn Windows features on or off. That's where you need to install containers here, because containers is the thing that Microsoft has as a service or a feature that you install, and then the Docker application allows you to control these containers. This is how they work together. Now in Windows 10, how do you? This containers won't be there by default, because what you also need to do, and all the developers will probably have done this, is you'll have in Windows 10 a developer settings. Here is something called developer mode, and you need to switch that on first. So in Windows 10 on your workstation, on your laptop, you set developer mode on. It does a whole bunch of things, and then when it comes back after reboot, you can install the feature containers, and when you've done that, you can install the Docker application. Now, I have installed the beta version of the Docker application because that one at the time was the only one that allowed me to switch between Windows and Linux. But I think that has changed now. So you might not need to install the beta version, which is always good, right? If you can install a more stable version, that's always good. I have not had any problems with this beta version, except for the fact that there's a new version almost twice a week. So it's pretty cool. It works nicely. Now, let me go to a directory that has some stuff in it, but we don't need it for now. What I have here is an administrator based command prompt, and what also would work is if you have a PowerShell window. I like the PowerShell window. It gives me a little bit better feedback on certain commands, and there are a few commands, like for instance, stopping all your containers at once, that work really nicely in PowerShell, and I haven't figured out a nice way to do this in a command window. But if you do a Docker pull, which is downloading a container from the internet, I would advise you to do this in a command window and not a PowerShell window, because it seems a bit more stable. I have had some problems where the PowerShell window would just freeze and it would not work. So I will use the command prompt window for a bit, and also I'll show you where these containers come from. Now, the first time you install all this stuff, you can check if you have images, and you probably won't have anything, but I'll just type Docker images, and for me it will show SQL Server Windows because I just installed it. Literally, I installed this while we were chatting, setting up this thing before 6 o'clock. It was unzipping the thing, probably while I was still talking about coffee shops somewhere. I'm not sure. This is quite big for a Docker container. You'll see in a bit that the Linux Docker container is much smaller and much faster to download. But the way you get this thing on your machine, and there's others as well. This is SQL Server Windows, and it took a long time to download because it didn't have the base containers like the Windows Server Core that it's based on, because you can base containers on other containers. So your container is based on your host OS, but then you need a host, then you need a container that has an operating system before you can base another container on top of that, and that's all built in. If I would have had that, it would have had to download less stuff. So if I would have done a Docker pull Microsoft and then Windows Server Core, it would let's just give that a try. Yes, perfect. It says already exists because it's probably part of this MS SQL Server Windows container image that I have, so you won't see it. Besides that, there's you can also download Nano Server. That one doesn't have support for SQL Server, so they've based SQL Server on the Windows Server Core container. But you can have the Windows Server Core container as a separate container if you want to. Now, since I have the image SQL Server Windows, I can now create a container based on this image. This is a little bit different than Hyper-V or VMware for that matter, where you can take a VM and start it, change something, shut it down, and then your image has been changed. This doesn't work that way for containers and images. There's quite a significant difference. Images do not change. You start a container which is based on the image, and you don't change the image. We'll go into how you create an image as well. I'll show you some code. We might even start the setup. Normally my laptop would explode in a lot of noise, and all the memory would be gone if I do that, because it would basically start up a SQL Server installation. But this thing has some memory, so we could do that. Now, first, let me see if that Windows Server Core demo works by starting a container. And first thing I'll do is run it interactively, and I need to specify which container I will run, and I'll give it a name, and also I need to specify which command I will run. So what I'll do is Docker run, and I will say I want to run it interactively, and I'll give it a name, and I'll say demo command. And I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but there's a cat very jealous that I'm in here talking, and hello cat, be quiet. I'm talking to people.
Not really. We can't hear, but we have some examples of that here as well.
Yes, he always needs to be in here, and then
Yeah.
yes, there he is. Hello. Anyhow, so I'm gonna name it demo command. You don't really have to name it. That's the cool part of containers. You can have 1,000 of them, and naming can be a little bit complicated. So let's not. You don't have to really name it, but I'm gonna do this for demo purposes. And I'm gonna say I'm gonna base this on the Microsoft Windows Server core container, and the command that I'm gonna start is command.exe. This will take a few seconds because it's the first time you run it. Sometimes it takes up to 10-20 seconds. Sometimes it's done in 4 seconds. Why this is, you'll see when we'll go into details on how you create a SQL Server container, because there can be a bunch of stuff that happens in the background. Now let's see if this actually starts a bit faster. This is the first time I'm starting it after the server had a boot. So come on. Should be done soon. And what I can do is, in the meantime, while it's starting, show you what you do to get a list of all the containers that are running. And there it is. I just did a Docker PS, and that gives you a list of the containers that are running. So not the image, and I can make this a little bit smaller. I see, to zoom out a bit, and then possibly run it again. Here we go. And this is in a PowerShell window. And as you can see, I have a container running, which is called demo CMD. And it's been up now for 24 seconds. And if I now go to my other window, there you go. I am actually inside the container now in a command window. So if I do it there, this is inside the container. This is not my OS. This is the container's OS. And I'm in interactive mode. You probably wouldn't use that, but this is just to show you that how this works. Now, as soon as I exit, I close the command window. That also shuts down the container. You will see that here. Now my Docker window comes back, and if I go back here and do a Docker PS, you will see that there are no more containers running. If I do a Docker PS -a, you will see that the container does still exist. -a will means show me all the containers that are there, whether they're running or not. So the container, we created a container and it exists, but I've exited the program that it was running, so it will stop the container. And I can restart it again by doing Docker start, or Docker run again, or even start a new container from the image. But we'll move to the SQL Server ones. Those are much more interesting to watch, I guess. So these are already a few commands that I showed you. Let's go up. There is Docker images, where you can see the containers. As you can see, it shows Windows Server Core now as well. And then there is Docker PS for the running containers, which is, it is not running anything right now. And there is Docker PS-A for containers that exist but are not running at the moment. Now, then we also saw there is Docker pull, and then you do Microsoft Windows, for instance, Windows Server Core to download the core machine, or MS SQL -server -Windows to get the SQL Server, and that will actually pull it down from the hub.docker.com, which I can also show you. I have here. This is the Docker website. This is where the container, the repositories are. I've Googled. I've searched for Microsoft SQL Server, and it gives me a couple of options here. So if you do MS SQL Server Linux, That won't work right now because we're in the Windows mode, but I'll show you in a minute, in a bit, in the on the other side when we switch to Linux. And here is MS SQL Server Windows, and this one I did pull down. We can, if we want to, we can start a SQL Server now, and why not do that? So what I'll do first, because you never know with Management Studio, this might take half an hour to start, or is this the new one? No, it seems pretty fast. Did my cat go away? Yes, she did. Okay, let me close the door again. She might be back, you never know. This is the weird part with Management Studio. They bring out all these versions these days, and some of them are really slow to start up, and some of them are really fast. I haven't figured out yet what's the deal with these things. But here we go. We've got an empty one right now. So what we can do is start this SQL Server Docker container. But here's the thing, the command is a little bit more difficult. And why this command is the way it is, we'll see that later, because you can actually make your own. What I'm going to do is docker run. I'm not going to say -it, not interactive, because I want to run it in the background. So I'll say -d, that means run it as a daemon or in the background. And -p is for port, because now I have to worry about the TCP IP port that I need to use to connect to the SQL Server that is going to run. Now internally, it's a default instance, so it will have 1433. And externally, I just want the same thing. I'm just going to say, yeah, give me 1433 as well. If I run more than one container, I'm going to have to choose another port, so I can't run both of them on 1433. So if I want to run 10 SQL servers on this box, I'm going to have to specify 10 different ports. Now the choice is very simple. The first one is the host. The second one is inside the container. So I'm running inside 1433, and I'm exposing that as 1433. That's basically what I'm doing here. Now I have some parameters that I need to set, that SQL Server needs to know about before it can start. So I'm going to say a -e for the first parameter, and then SA password. And the SA password that I'm going to pick, and why this thing needs an SA password will become clear when we look inside the build script that actually makes this SQL Server. I'm just going to do password 1, and I'll do another one, and this is, and anyone that has used the unattended install options for SQL Server might recognize this. The accept end user license agreement is yes. If you do an unattended install of SQL Server, this is one of the options that you always have to set, that, hey, I'm installing this thing automatically and I do accept the end user license agreement. I understand that I have to pay lots of money per core if I use Enterprise Edition. And let's see, no, I'm going to skip the other two and use that for later. And I'm going to base, and oh yeah, and the container that I'm going to start is Microsoft, and then MS SQL Server Windows. This command should now start. Unable to find. Interesting. Why is it doing that? Oh yeah, typo. Okay, cool. I said Windows with an S. Here we go. And now the really long number that you see there while it's starting the container with SQL Server is the actual ID of the container. If you want to, for instance, shut down this image or remove it, all you need to do is specify the part of the ID that is unique. So right now I have only one running, so even 4 what it starts with would be enough. If you have 10 running and the unique part would be 42 or 42924E84, then that would be enough. This is if you want to remove it or stop it or start it or something. Now, You can also specify it by name, because now we didn't specify a name. So Docker itself came up with a name, and it has a weird, funny, if I just do Docker PS, you can see here the container is running, and this here is the name it picked. It has this two-part name, and this one is called Lucid Edison. And I've seen the weirdest names already coming out of that thing. It's quite funny what it comes up with sometimes. So you have two ways of talking to this container. Oh, actually, three ways. First of all, you can name it yourself. But try to get away from that, especially if you run lots of containers and you start them, you run testing against them and you stop them again. Why go through the trouble of coming up with names? Let the naming be handled by it, or by using the ID that it's used. And here you see a small part of the ID. So if I start another one, it would get another ID. Now I have SQL Server running. Let's see if that's still the case. I had one case where it would actually stop. No, it's still there. So you can see status up about a minute, which is cool. I have a SQL Server now. Now I need to connect. And this is the part where Windows and Linux are a bit different. I am now going to have to figure out what the internal IP address of this container is. I cannot just connect with 1433, unfortunately. I would have been able, if this machine that I'm running this container on is different from the one that I have my management studio on, then I can just connect with the server name. And because it's 1433, it would just behave like a named instance, not a named instance, a default instance. But I'm connecting locally, and in Windows, it doesn't work like that. I need to connect on the IP address. So how do I find the IP address of this container? Well, I just go docker inspect and I give it the name. Now, since I have only one running, I just use part of the ID. I could also say Lucid Edison. That would also work, and it gives me back the IP address. Lots of information actually, but it also contains the IP address, which is right here. So I'm gonna take that and go connect to my database engine, and as a server name, I'm gonna use the IP address. I'm gonna say SQL authentication, type SA PASS at word1. And there we go. I've just connected to my container. There's nothing in it, but this is my connection to a SQL Server Docker container that I'm connecting to with Management Studio while I'm on the same box. If I start, I can do that. If I go here and start another one, so I don't specify a name, it will come up with a name itself. But what I do need to do is give it a different port. So I'm going to say 10,000. I get another ID. It will start another container with SQL Server. Takes a few seconds, 5 to 10 seconds, possibly. Why that is, it depends on what it does in the background. And instead of just doing docker inspect, I can actually do, let me copy paste that. That works a lot faster. I'm on another screen now, copying a little bit more code. Oh yeah, that's PowerShell. I need to be here or else it won't work. So I do docker inspect -f and I get a part of that JSON that comes out of the Docker container. Actually, if you do docker inspect, the information that comes out is in the JSON format. And I need to specify the container name. Ooh, yes, I didn't remember that one. So CB, the other one started with 42. So if I go here and do docker ps, you can see I have a CB and I have a 42. So now I need the CB one. So I'll just say CB. And here's my IP address, which it gets from, which is just a part of that docker inspect that you saw before. And I'll connect to that one, different IP address, but I did specify the same here. And there we go, 2 instances of SQL Server. So for everybody that says, yeah, Docker is really cool because you can install SQL Server in no time. Well, yeah, sort of, kind of. The SQL Server is pre-installed on the thing. That's the magic behind it. This is why it goes so fast. But it's really cool. I just, I need another SQL Server. I just run this command and boom, you have another one and another one. And it doesn't matter. If you have automated testing that you need to do, just start another SQL Server and be on your way. Now, unfortunately, containers are not really meant to have state in them. So anything that changes inside the container, you're not supposed to do that because I got this question, and I hear it at other Docker presentations as well. How do you, if you run SQL Server inside a container, how do you patch it? How do you update SQL Server? Answer, you don't. You create a new container that has the right version. So you create a new, fresh, patched SQL Server with a new version or a new service pack or a new security patch or whatever, and you swap it out. You stop the old one, you start the new one, and basically you replace your SQL Server. That's what you do. Now, what happens to the databases inside them? Well, they're gone. There's nothing magical about this. They will be gone. So what do? Well, you don't put your databases inside the container. That's what you do. So let me show you how that works. What I have here, oh, and I can see my disk filling up. Nice, 5 point, okay, cool. We can still do that before we see my system crash. That will be, and I have a Docker directory here, and I have a DB directory here, and inside I have a Docker test MDF and LDF. This is just an empty database that I made on a different SQL Server. I detached it and I copied the files there. I can prove that to you by renaming them. That wouldn't have worked if they were attached to a SQL Server. They're just separate files. So what I now need to do is do the same starting of SQL Server, but I need to specify some more stuff. So let's do that here, and let's actually do that here so you can see what I'm doing. I'll do it in the middle of the screen. So what I'll do now is -v, where I'll say, wait a minute, I need to map a volume. Now what I'm doing here, I'll do C docker db. Oh, sorry, this way. Yeah. Use the /, not the \. And I will map this to, with a colon, and I'll map this inside to ctemp. It doesn't really matter, but again, this part is inside the container, and this part is on my host. So this has to exist. I just showed you that's where my files are. And the ctemp, it will just create that inside the container, which will not really exist. It will just be a mapping to the cdocker db. Now I also have to specify that my drives are connected. So I need another parameter with a little bit of information, which I'll paste so I won't make any typos. Oh, I didn't paste it. Let's try that again. Because I need to tell it where, there we go. So I get another parameter, attach DBs, and here's a bunch of JSON again. And I give it a DB name, it's called Docker test, and a DB files, and then my Docker test MDF and my Docker test LDF. So basically I'm saying, hey Docker, run this container for me, give it a port. Oh, yes, I'll give it the port, give it a port 10,001. And map this drive and also attach these documents, not documents, database files when you start. So if I do this, start another container, I'll have 3 of them in a second. It should start up, attach the containers, should take a few seconds. And Come on, you can do it. There we go. Oh, here's an error. What happened? Cannot find the file. Did I mistype? Probably made a typo there. I did C docker db, and they are. That's where they are. Okay, interesting. They're on C. There is probably a typo in what I just did.
Hi, Andre. Hi,
Yeah.
Andre. Sorry to interrupt. You got your Windows Explorer behind, right? That's on C Docker DB, and you're indicating C temp Docker test.
Yeah, no. So the C temp is in the container, and the C docker db is outside
Okay,
the
got
container.
it.
So that's where it should be.
Uh-huh.
It's fine. I'll try it in a bit later on my local machine, which I know that it works there. If not, we'll see it in a sec. But basically, what this should have done, and we'll try it. We'll try it in a bit as well, is connect the data files, and then I would be able to connect with Management Studio, and you would see the databases there. And there is probably a typo in the JSON there somewhere. Does it? System cannot find the file specified. Huh, interesting. Okay. Anyway, let's continue a bit and come back to this later if we have some time, because I see we're already almost an hour on the way. And what I wanted to show you, and here we go. If I do a Docker PS, you'll see I still have two of them running, and there's a Docker PS-A. You'll see a bit more here already. And then you'll see I've exited one, and here's one that I've created, but it wouldn't start. And then there's the two ones that I'm running, and I can clean them all up with one go. But what I first want to do, there's two more things that I want to show you before we can go back to this one. And one of the things is, how do you create these containers? How does this work with these JSON files and whatnot? And the second one is, how does that work with the Linux part? That's not a huge demo, so I go do that now. What I'll do here is I'll go switch to Linux containers, and it says Docker is switching. So it says this may take some time, but it doesn't actually take much time at all, because that Hyper-V machine was already running in my Hyper-V manager. So the switching should be fairly quickly. Yeah, Docker is running, and it now says switch to Windows containers. So now I have switched to Linux. And if I clear my screen here and do a Docker PS, there's nothing. And a Docker PS-A, again, nothing. Docker images, also nothing. This is completely empty. So let's not waste any time and do a Docker pull Microsoft MS SQL Server and then Linux. And it's going to go to hub.docker.com. You remember that the other one was 13 gigabytes? You see the difference here? Interesting. I have not figured out why this is nothing more than a couple of 100 megabytes, but there you go. That's what it is. It's extracting some. I would not have been able to talk through this with the other one. That took 20 minutes or something, and here it's like a minute, not even, I think. Is this the longest one? It needs to extract this one when it's done. So it's got the base OS, it's getting the Linux thing, and almost there, extracting it, and then one more. And then let's see if we can start that one and connect to it. That will be cool. Come on, you can do it. Come on. I said a minute. That should be about it, right? Yeah, and then there's one more part, and that is just a little bit. And we're done. We've got ourselves SQL Server downloaded. How cool is this? So if I do Docker images, there you go. There's my size, 1 GB. SQL Server on Linux. Let's start this thing. So let me just, for speed purposes, copy this command. And did the copy not work? Let's see. Last time I had some. This is what I figured. Oh, come on. Copy paste. Why are you fighting me? Copy. Easily. Come on. Paste. It's gonna make me type it, I'm sure. Right click, copy. Click here. No. Oh, this is interesting. Okay. Docker run dash background dash p port 10,002 1433 dash ESA password equals PASS at word 1 and dash E accept end user license agreement equals yes, and we'll base this on Microsoft MS SQL Server Linux. Hope this works. That is the same command. This went really quick. That is usually not a good sign. Docker ps dash a, and it exited. So I gave it probably a wrong command. So let's do Docker start blissful Hypatia and dash a should system administrator password is not configured and it needs SA password, and that is probably because this is Linux, which means case sensitive, so it should be SA password like this. Also goes really quickly. What else did I not do right? Port already allocated. We're getting somewhere. 10,002 already allocated. Interesting. Or is this the other way around where I have to use a different port now? Or the 1430. Yes. Haha. Here's the difference between SQL Server on Windows and SQL Server on Linux. It now says the port is already allocated because I now can connect to the port name and I don't have to use the IP address. So I either have to kill the 1433 that I already have, or maybe, just maybe, I can say don't use 1433, but just go with 10,002. I'm not sure. This takes longer. Now, okay, let's kill the 1433 that I already have here. Details. I have a. Okay, let's not try it that way. But I have this one here that I can't. Yes. Bear with me here, guys. I am going to switch to Windows. And when it's done, now I can do Docker ps. And then I have the one that has 1433. That would be the Lucid Edison. So Docker stop Lucid Edison or 42, whatever. This is my my local one. That one should be gone now. Switch to Linux. Don't worry, there is a way to run these all together, but it's just because I haven't figured out how to do that. But now I should be able to start this thing with the 1433 thing. Ah, and it gives me an error again. Docker start 999-A. Oh, no. Recovery is complete. No error. It just started really quickly. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Then I should be able now to go to database engine and then just type localhost SA. I use the password. There you go. Start a query on it. Opening the file. And do a select add version. Make this bigger. There we go. SQL Server on Linux on my Windows machine inside a container. While I have the other containers with SQL Server on Windows still running. So because I switched to Linux doesn't mean that the containers are stopping. It's just the management application can only manage one at a time, but they're still there. At least that's what I found out last time when I was presenting this. I said no, they're all stopped, but they weren't. So if I can switch to Windows containers now, and when I started this interactively, so is it still there? Okay, Docker PS. So now I'm on my Windows side. Is my my Linux container is still there, while I'm on my management side in the Docker app. I'm working with Linux, Windows. How cool is that? Quick and easy way to run SQL Server on Linux. Best way, just have your Docker, switch it to Linux, Docker pull Microsoft, and then MS SQL Server Linux, and then start it with the command I just showed you, and you're done. You have no Linux to install or anything. It does that all for you. Really easy and cool way. Now, the last thing. How does this work? How do you build a container? How did Microsoft do this? Why do you have to specify these files so to be able to run them outside a container? Well, very simple. Let me show you a build here. Here's my directory SQL Server 2016. I have a Docker file, which I'll open with a notepad. No, don't download anything new. Cancel. And this is a Docker build file. This is what Microsoft has placed on the Docker hub, and every 2 weeks or so, automatically they build a new version of the Docker container. This is available from GitHub. If you go to Docker hub.docker.com and you find the SQL Server, you'll find the I can actually show you that. It's much easier than talking about it. For instance, SQL Server Windows. If I click on this, it will, and it's Windows. It's this one says 180-day public preview. There is also a developer edition for SQL Server that they have built. Here's the command line that you can run to start them, but also here we go, SQL Server Docker GitHub repository. And if I click on that, it will go to GitHub, and there is your the code that they used. And I'm on the Windows one. And you can get all the files that you need to create the Docker image. So if you like to dive into that and learn some more on how to make Docker images, that's where you go. I'm clicking all over the place. I should be here. Now this this Docker file is basically the command that you use to create a new container based on another container. You can't really create a base container out of nothing just based on the host OS. I think there are a few tricks for Windows, but forget about that. Just use the Windows Server Core or Nano Server as your base. You can create one with a web server switched on with your application inside it or whatever you want, as long as it's not GUI based, application based stuff. So a web application obviously is fine, but you wouldn't be able to start Management Studio from a container or something. And I've seen a few blog posts that describe how to RDP into a container, but it's also not something that you would really want to do. So also, instead of building it with a build script like you see here, it is possible to take a container, go into it with a command line, install a bunch of stuff on it, tweak it until you're done, and then turn that container into an image. But then you've just made a non-repeatable process for yourself. So that kind of defeats the whole works on my machine thing, right? You want to automate the build and make sure it works every time. Now, what you see here is a few simple lines, and I'll go through them a little bit so you understand what it does. The top one that says from Microsoft Windows Server Core is obviously the container that it is based on. So you're basically saying, okay, I want to create a new image, and it will be based on this image. Now, there's a label from the guy who made it at Microsoft. And here's an environment variable. One is called exe and one is called box, and it's a few links to Microsoft. This is actually the download for SQL Server Developer Edition from the Microsoft website, without you having to confirm or click a button or whatever. It's just a direct download link. If I click this, something will start downloading it. And it's basically a zip file, but in two parts, an exe and a box file that together create this ISO. It's basically the ISO, but in a different format. Then it creates, and these should look familiar from what I've just demoed, it creates a few environment variables like the SA password, the attached DBs collection, and the accept end user license agreement. And let's see what else is important. Yeah, let's go here. What it does here, it starts working on this empty container by copying something called start.ps1 to the root of the container. And it sets the work dir to the root of the container. And I'll get back to you in a minute on what that start.ps1 is. First thing I'll go to is this run, and as you can see, there is a run, another run, then a health check, and a command. And let's go see here. This run does an invoke web request, so it's a PowerShell thing, and it downloads this this box. And then there's another web request that downloads the exe that it found. And then there is a start process that basically unwraps these files and turns them into the ISO that you saw. And then, and unpacks it. Sorry, it unpacks them. So you have everything that was in the ISO that was in this weird format, unpacked in a directory inside your image. The last command here is SQL Server people will probably recognize it. This is the unattended setup. It's not magic. You're just setting up a SQL Server inside a base OS. So this runs the setup with all the features that you like. So if you want to have a SQL Server with a different collation or something, this is where you change it. You just take this file and change it to what you want it to do. And then after it has done that, it removes all the files. So where does this magic come from with the SA password and whatnot? Well, there's one more step that we need to do. What it does here is it stops SQL Server once it has done the install. And after that, it changes some values in the registry. it sets the port to 1433, and it switches on TCP/IP. And this login mode value to just means switch on SQL logins, because we need we don't have Active Directory, so we can't make a trusted connection. So we need to switch this SQL logins on. Now, a little sidestep before we get to the start.ps1. When you're starting a container, it will sometimes say it's health, it's starting, or healthy. How does it know that? How does a container know what healthy means, right? It doesn't know anything about SQL Server. So how would it know that a SQL Server inside a container is healthy? Does it just mean the container is up and I don't know what's running inside? No. It has a health check command that it runs, and you as a developer need to tell it, what do you think healthy means? So in this case, you do a SQL command with the query select one. That means you can connect to the SQL Server and run an arbitrary query. That's what healthy means to it, and it will just tell the Docker container, listen, this thing is healthy because it has SQL Server, but don't worry about it. I did the right check. Now, last thing, this, as you can see, it says run here a few times, and this is command. This is actually what it starts when you start a container from an image. This is what it will do. So the container is not a container with SQL Server in it, and when you start it, it boots Windows, and with that, SQL Server comes up. No. SQL Server has been explicitly switched off. The service has been stopped in the build. So you are getting a container with a stopped SQL Server in it. And it has a start.ps1 file. And that is what it will run when you start the container, because in this command, it says, what do I need to start when you say, create me a container, do a Docker run. It will start the start.ps1. And then it just gives the parameters that we gave it before. And it uses that in the start.ps1. So this would be a good moment to actually show you the start.ps1. Almost full, we're doing well. Docker 2016 start.ps1. Here we go. Now I'm not going to go through all the thing because we're an hour and 15 minutes underway already, but you can see here that it will do a start service. So it will start the SQL Server for you. It will say, hey, if you didn't say yes to the accept end user license agreement, I will give you an error and exit. And also, here's the part that starts the database with the files externally, which I demoed, but there's a typo in it probably. So here you see that it takes the convert from JSON. So on the command line, I actually gave it some JSON, and the PowerShell script that starts it will actually do an SP attach DB to those files that it created, and runs that command. And then we'll say, hey, I started the SQL Server, and we're done. This is basically how Docker runs a container. It doesn't know how to start SQL Server. You tell it what to do. And in this case, the Microsoft developer that came up with this imagined it would be best if he would use a PowerShell command to do that, which would allow him to use variables and start it in a certain way. So I'm hoping that when you see this, you go, oh, wait a minute, I can change this and use it a bit differently because I have slightly different ways I want to use SQL Server maybe inside a container. And the answer is, well, you can absolutely do that, because once you have this, let's go into Docker and SQL 2016. So once you've got what you need. So in this case, the start.ps1, because I want to copy this inside the container, and I've got a Docker file in a directory, and I have the image on this machine. All I need to do, and this will take a while, but I'll start it and I'll just let it run while we wrap up. But all you need to do is go docker build -t SQL Server. This is my name that I'm giving to it. So I'm just using the name SQL Server because to me it makes sense. Microsoft has used MS SQL Server Windows. I'm just saying SQL Server. And the last thing that I need to do is specify where the build file is, and that is in the local directory. So I'm just giving it a dot, and let's see if this runs, and there you go. And it will now start to build this container, and it has some kind of caching process. So if I make a mistake somewhere in step 8 or something, and I fix it and I run it again, it will just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those are already done because they didn't change, and I'm going to start with 8 again. And right now, it is probably running the web requests and downloading the file. Bit hard to see, and after that it will do an unattended, it will extract the file, do an unattended setup, change the IP port, and then close the container, and presto, I'll have a new container. Unfortunately, we won't be able to see this to the end unless you guys want to just sit here and wait for an hour. I don't know exactly how long it runs, but it does a complete setup of SQL Server, so it might take a bit too much of the time. One thing that I forgot to show that I can, if I run another command window, oh no, PowerShell. Let's do the PowerShell window. So I have Docker PS. I have a few images running here. If I want to stop all the images when you're done, all you need to do is a Docker stop, and then either the name of the image or just the first part of the ID. But what I can also do is a little bit of PowerShell, Docker PS -a -q. This will stop all of them at the same time. There you go. They're all stopped now. And I can also say Docker RM. This means Docker remove. And this will be a Docker PS -a -q. And now it has stopped and removed all the containers that I have. So if I do a Docker PS, nothing's running. Docker PS -a, nothing's there. Docker image, Docker images, those are still there, and hopefully my setup is also still running. No, that killed it nicely. Good demo. Apparently I shouldn't have done that while demoing it. It doesn't matter because you wouldn't have been able to see the end anyway. But it does work on my own laptop. I do have a copy of this SQL. It's if you copy it directly from the GitHub, it's just really easy to just make your own build of SQL Server. It's pretty cool. And last thing you have is when you do Docker images, I can do a Docker RMI and give it an image name, and that would actually remove the image from my machine. But then that means I would have to Docker pull it again from the Docker website. You can pull it from the public website with Docker pull and then SQL Server Windows. You can also have your own account on Docker and upload your own images where they will become publicly available. So don't do this with licensed SQL servers. Microsoft will obviously not like you if you do that. But you can also create a private account and put your containers there. And there are other ways to run your own container, your own image sources inside your network, and even on Azure. If you're on Azure, you can actually start a Windows Server 2016, which has been set up for containers already. So the images are already there and all the container stuff is running. And you can start running and playing with containers inside your Azure Windows Server 2016. So sort of kind of virtualization inside an Azure VM, which is pretty cool if you want to play around with it that way. That's totally up to you. That one though will only run Windows stuff. I have not found a way to run Linux on it yet, but who knows what's coming, right? This is all fairly new. This with this app on my Windows 10 machine is the best way I've seen so far to play around with Docker on Windows and at the same time run SQL Server on Linux and just have everything local. I thought that was a really cool way of doing this really quickly. So with that, I think we're already an hour and 22 minutes on the way. I think I got through most of it. I was able to show most of it. There, I haven't figured out the typo. I probably made a little typo. I'm not going to try to fix it. What I'll do is I'll fix it afterwards to have my demos working again, and I'll make sure you. I don't know if you guys have a way to share code or something, but if you ask me for it or something, I'll make sure you get the right ones without the typo.
We can put it on the blog, Andre. No problem.
Perfect. I'll make sure that
the post or something.
Excellent. I'll make sure that the version you get is the one without the typo, that it actually works. And if I did something else that made it not run, I'll figure it out and I'll make sure I correct it and comment it out. I have a script here that I was typing from and copying from that will have the commands, and I'll make sure that you get that as well. With that, I'm done. Thank you guys for letting me talk into this microphone for an hour and practice my Docker skills. And with that, if you guys have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them if I can.
Hi, Andre. Yes, we're waiting, but people are saying that that's really an interesting subject, but I don't think they're gonna have. I don't think we're gonna have much questions because it's fairly new, right?
Yeah,
fairly new.
This is all. So for a lot of developers, Docker is already they use it a lot. Just for us database people, this is fairly new. Like I said, also you shouldn't run state inside a container, so you should run it outside. So this is probably why we haven't run into it a lot. It's really cool for testing environments.
Yep.
I was thinking this would be cool to run scripts against various versions of a SQL Server quickly, but then I would have to make various versions of the container also. It runs on Windows Server Core, and I'm pretty sure not the old versions of SQL Server don't really run in Windows Server Core. And then there's this .NET Framework 3 at some point that you have to install, and there's some things. But I was talking to a developer the other day about a Redis cache, and he went, "What is that?" And it was switched to Linux, and the only thing we had to do to get it on my laptop is a Docker pull Redis, and there you go. And I had it installed in in what? What is this? A few seconds, a minute. So it is a really cool way to get fairly complicated stuff on your system fast and play with it. Especially I think the SQL Server for Linux. If you want to start playing with that on your Windows laptop, you do not have to install any VM with Linux on it. Just get this Docker stuff on there and just do Docker pull Microsoft /MS SQL Server Linux, and you're done. You can just run SQL Server and play with it and connect to it from your own management studio. That's a pretty cool way to get started, I think.
Yes, exactly, precisely. In some way in the future, this is gonna be production wise, right? You're gonna have, in the future. I'm not saying now, of course.
So the Windows stuff is already available in for production purposes in SQL in Windows Server 2016. It's all fairly new. We have to get used to how this all works and how to get to the logs and how to control these things. And there's a whole ecosystem on the Linux side. It's much more grown up, and there's a whole ecosystem around Docker. And not just Docker, there's other variants as well these days that allow you to control a whole bunch of containers. What if you have a thousand of them, or 10,000, or 100 servers that all are running containers? How do you manage that? And there's a whole ecosystem of applications and software around that already. So it is much more grown up than I've been able to show here in my tiny little Windows demos, but the Linux side is pretty grown up already. So production, yeah, this happens a lot. Of course, if it's new to you, and to me it is new as well, let's start with testing, get used to it. But no, I like this for production as well. Maybe not tomorrow. No, not with the company I work now. I'm not going to suggest, oh, no, we can just run Docker containers. They'll look at me funny.
Yeah, I agree. That would happen.
Yeah, but someday, sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Andre. So people are just giving compliments, saying great presentation and great, quite interesting subject, quite interesting stuff. And well, all we can do here is say thank you very much for your time, your patience. I know it's already late. It's noon there, so it's really late.
No, it's okay. It's just a bit after midnight, so it's not that crazy. We're developers and DBAs. We're used to
yeah. I said noon and it's midnight. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Anyway, so okay. So then, Vitor, you there?
Yeah.
Cool. So you want to finish up? Andre, thank you very much again. Okay.
Oh, thank you. Obrigado.
De nada. De nada.
Yeah, I just also want to thank you, Andre, for your time. This is all new stuff for me, and I like it a lot. It's very interesting, and I want to study more, and maybe and in the future, who knows? But I like it. So thank you again for your time. And if you have an interest and you have time, we can schedule another session in the future. We would like a lot to have you again with us.
I'd be honored anytime. No problem.
Yeah, ok, thank you. E também só agradecer a galera aí que tá acompanhando. Obrigado a todos aí que ficaram assistindo. O horário um pouquinho diferenciado pra gente aqui, né? Às 6 horas, a gente tá acostumado a fazer às 9, mas foi bacana, o público foi legal. Valeu, galera, por vocês terem acompanhado, terem prestigiado também. E qualquer dúvida, fiquem à vontade para mandar perguntas para mim, para Marcelo, para o próprio André, sem problema nenhum. Beleza, galera? Eu acabo por aqui. O vídeo provavelmente já fica disponível em poucos minutos, já vai estar inteirinho disponível lá no YouTube para todo mundo. E é isso aí, Marcelão. Cara, tô tranquilo. Você quer falar mais alguma coisa?
Tranquilo, só agradecer ao André de novo. E você pode tirar do ao vivo aí, se quiser.
Beleza, galera.
Obrigado, pessoal.
Valeu, galera. Obrigado. Nos vemos no próximo webcast e também aí nos eventos, né? Como o Marcelão comentou com vocês aí. Se você estiver vendo esse vídeo gravado, talvez você tenha perdido excelentes eventos. Então, fica sempre atento aí que a gente está divulgando. Falou, galera. Grande abraço aí para vocês. Até mais.